So Yukka was founded. Yukka, is that the right pronunciation, by the way?
Yukka, yeah, Yukka.
Yukka. Is it named after the palm tree? Where does the name
Yes.
come from?
Well, I mean, it has the meaning of the palm tree. So a tree has roots that provide everything that the business unit and the leaves need to thrive. So that's what we want to do with information for experts and business units. Have a systematic approach on what you need as a resource to make the best decisions. But Yuka is spelled with double C, and we just put double K. It's unique and distinct, also to get rid of any registration issues and website issues. So it's Yukka with double K, and you always stand out because it's kind of like, oh, okay, what's this? So
I even thought it was actually spelled with double K. It felt natural. I think.
yeah.
I
Well,
don't know.
there's a Finnish name, how you pronounce it, Yukka. But we say
Yukka.
Yukka in German. YUKKA Lab was the beginning. So we had the lab part adjacent to it to kind of signal, okay, there's a new technology that's able to read text like a human brain. What could be potential use cases? How are you analyzing the news? What are you doing with the news in your processes, in your daily work? And this is really how we created the series of products. And we have a credit lab, a risk lab, an investment lab, and a sales lab tailored to these specific tasks. That was the origin. And now that we are a grown-up company, we drop the lab and focus on what we have and on execution. So it's more about scaling what we have rather than untapping new use cases. That's why the lab is an internal thing and the company is just Yuka. It's short-term and more.
But you started it back in 2017, right? And that was way before how AI became the hype it is today, the impact we see it has on society. Did you already have Gen AI or AI? You can elaborate on this as a core component back then, or is this something that came later?
Well, that came later. I mean, it started actually 2014, and Andreas, who founded YUKKA Lab, met at a private event two NLP experts. So back then, NLP, natural language processing, that's what was the main topic. So it wasn't called AI, but it was called natural language processing. And he was really fascinated because he was working in the investment industry for hedge funds. And in the crisis in 2009, he was trying to capture the sentiment from the news by hand with interns to see when is it kind of reaching the bottom and when is it kind of slightly tipping up as the right moment to invest again. And that idea kind of stuck with him. Obviously, it wasn't feasible to do it by hand. And then when he heard what they are trying to do and that they're not having a use case, he said, okay, might be a sparings partner. So he was really more a first client to them. And then he got more involved. The first span was a garage phase where they just tried out the feasibility because obviously in the beginning they were working with rule-based sentiment approach. So good as positive, something
Simple.
bad negative. And it got an overcrowded framework of thousands of such rules, which started to contradict each other, right? And that was sort of the garage level to prove, okay, the new sentiment is not priced in the stock price, which we all learned at school. That's true for one single event, which is then represented in individual news articles. But the aggregated sentiment of all news is more like your gut feeling. You start to read about bad news, bad events, and this uncertainty starts to pile up. And that causes you to create more a panic type of reaction. If then something really material happens, like a war outbreak or COVID, you start to drop your entire investments. And that's where you really kind of run into the rabbit hole and you're not going to get out of that for 10, 12 years until the market has recovered. So that really was the idea, to create a measurement that then is condensed into an early warning signal. Should you be fully invested into the stock market because the news are overly positive across all sectors, across all companies? So it's very strong. And if something happens, it will be like a 3-day V correction, but everyone is very, very positive and it's a good ground for future performance. But if there is a lot of uncertainty in the news and a lot of risk events, it starts to pile up. And then you should be more careful because it's not 100% rational anymore. Something can happen and the market's just going to crash, right? And that's not something you can really have a rule-based approach or foresee, but you can predict it with eroding sentiment in the aggregated news. That's what the signal does, and then it advises you, depending on your model, to slowly take out money from stocks. And you can reduce the drawdown and have much better risk KPIs while still kind of enjoying the upside of the market. It's a great signal. It's live since 2017. It actually had 10 days pre-notice on COVID, 10 days on
Oh, that's
Liberation Day
fantastic.
with the tariffs. It works on every drawdown, and you can actually pair it with whatever you're doing because it's a new element,
But
something that wasn't there before.
so you mentioned that it kind of learns the market behavior. So the latest tariffs didn't have as much impact as the earlier ones, right? Because people kind of don't really care anymore.
Yeah, so it doesn't learn market behavior. That's something, that people think we feed it the stock price and then it kind of learns. It's a linguistic model. That's why it's called natural language processing. So what we did is kind of like raising a kid, right? So we wrote grammar books, taught it words, sentences, semantics, and all this, so it could read news articles. Then we taught it, okay, there's companies, they are in different industries and sectors. So kind of like what you learn at university, understand how the whole economy works and how it all ties together. And then we taught it the events that basically move the business. Okay, mergers and acquisition, sales volume increase, reporting drop, margin call, to biodiversity loss, water stewardship, the whole sustainability angle of it, fraud event, cyber attack, data breach, everything that we know that moves business forward, right? And then it learned to understand that, not with words, but really from the meaning. So we annotated corporas. And then it was at the level where you would probably graduate from university and you understand how things run and you have the capacity to look at data and create insights. So we said, okay, now let's send it into internships, go in investment, risk management, sales, marketing, and let's see where you add value or where you can add most of the value. And that's how we then, with the customers, that was the lab part, developed our different solutions for credit, for risk management, investment, sales, sustainability. And it got promoted slowly to junior and then mid-senior position because, it's simply unbeatable when it comes to the scope of data it can look at. So it can analyze the entire news landscape in real time. So no human can ever beat that, right?
I love how you refer to it as an employee almost, like it has the seniorities that it grows over time. Is that a conscious like model you've built inside? Because I've never heard that before.
Well, I mean, that was kind of the entrepreneurial struggle, right? I mean, I'm a parent myself. I have two boys. One is 1.5 and one is 4.5. And I'm going through the same process with them. And it's even slower with a human brain, right? That's the most powerful that is on the planet. But even though we actually managed to beat it in this specific aspect, right? In the time that we built Yukka, we also built a brain that analyzes news. And for that, it needed to comprehend human language, so texts, and understand the whole corporate landscape, the industries. And I mean, that's what I'm teaching them. Like, this is a tractor, this is a car, it's driving. How is it driving? Oh, it has a motor. So I'm explaining all these different parts, which were the events. And once they get that, they can make their own kind of reasoning and be like, if this is like this is the same, right? So they all of a sudden bring new ideas to me that, I didn't see anymore because I've started to think in the same repeatable patterns, and they start to ask questions about that. So the sentiment allows us to see the mood of the global news arena. I'm not able to see that because I am captured in my own perception, right? So
Yeah.
I read, let's say, 20 articles a day, but they're fed to me by algorithms that are already biasing me. They know what I'm interested in. So of course it's about AI, it's about finance, it's about investment, right? So I'm not seeing a lot of the things out there that might be much more prominent and much more written about. So COVID is a very good example where we were all trapped sort of in our own bubble. And yeah, you could kind of have the feeling everyone is just seeing what I'm seeing, but it wasn't the case. And it's the same for investment or business topics. You read about Tesla, Facebook, Amazon, because that's the most prominent stories, right? That's what moving or what the publishers kind of put on the tabloids, right? But
Yeah.
is that really who you're dealing with in your everyday business life? Probably not. You have probably a book of 10,000 SME clients that you're never tracking the news for because they're not really a lot in the news. But when they are, you're probably going to miss it, right? And that's
Yeah.
what we want to change. So we want to show you really like 100% of the news and also give you a measure to see like, okay, am I only seeing this or is this really like the entire truth?
Mm.
And that's the mission behind Yukka. We want to make news measurable, so you can actually quantify it.
It reminds me of back in the days, I worked with social media at Samsung, and we had the responsibility in our team to track market sentiment. And this was way back. This was like 15 years ago. It's evolved a lot. So we use tools like Meltwater is a big one of the big ones. How do you think it's changed? And if I would have still be doing that today, like what more empowerment would I have? Like how far have we come, do you think?
Well, it's funny because I mean, I did my master's degree and then started as the assistant of a CEO of a media intelligence company that was servicing also Samsung in Switzerland. Yeah, this was basically the beginnings. So it was about print clipping, right? That was what the old name of this industry is. The chief communication officer would want to have every mention of the company on the table to see transparently who is saying what. Do I need to react? This is very focused on individual journalists and articles. And then this whole thing started to evolve when I was there. At the time, I then became head of the product management, then head of the product development, was on the board there. And in that time, we went from delivering clippings, even per mail, printed out, to online monitoring came. That's when Meltwater started to exist. Social media came along. So you needed, back then, you could actually monitor Facebook and Twitter and all these channels. So it was very open. And we built a SaaS platform where you could see this entire media resonance around your competitors and your own company. And that was the first innings of sentiment. Obviously, we tried it there. Everyone did. And it was so bad that people, said immediately, yeah, this is not positive. This is not negative. They, yeah, kind of laughed at it. But already then, we took a group of 25 of our analysts and had them annotate the sentiment by hand. And they only got, I think, 75 or 80% alignment because they looked at it from different point of views. So
Mm,
already there, you had to argue with the individual. Yes, you have another judgment on the sentiment, but you can also see it in another light. So it's not that difficult or not that easy to beat your own perception and judgment. And there will always be a misalignment, even among your friends. And I think that's still one of the hardest challenges when you speak about insights from unstructured data, especially in the environment where we are active, the financial industry. It has been powered and running on reported solid facts, how much revenue, how much employees do they have, did the revenue go up? So it's all on reported numbers. And now the industry should adopt unstructured insights, which have a certain degree of fuzziness in them. So it's never 100% accurate, because it's based on natural language processing, machine learning, and AI, right? So I think that's the biggest paradigm shift that the industry needs to make in order to adopt the benefits of this new technology. Yeah, I think that's what they need to do if they want to further be the number one, exist in those industries, because the whole structured data sets, they're commoditized, right? Everyone has them, they're easy to access, and everyone knows what the KPIs are, how to kind of leverage them the best. So there's not really a lot of ground to cover and where you can get a competitive advantage out. So
yeah.
it's basically wrenched out of alpha and competitive advantage pretty much. Everyone is doing more or less the same. So we wanted to bring a new data set to the market where you have these news volumes, news sentiment, the events per company. We created news-based scores for investment, risk, credit, and sustainability, where you can have a totally new data set that no one else can access if they don't have a machine doing it. So this really creates a new set to compete on and to be faster. So if you take sales and you monitor your book of 10,000 clients and I don't know, the 5,000 that you want to get, and you create a logic where you say, okay, AI, every time in the news, if I see this and this event, it's a sales opportunity. You're basically identifying the right companies to talk to, whether it's a window of relevance, about the right topic. And if you get that, the right topic, the right time, you get the attention. And that's the hardest to get nowadays, right? And if you're using this, and I mean, our software reads 2 million articles a day, it's a huge advantage over a sales guy that just randomly reaches out to a company where it's not a topic and there is no attention for it.
You mentioned all of these areas of application now, like in sales. You mentioned marketing, ESG, stock trading, market behaviors. Where do you see the greatest impact of something like Yukka today? Like, where is it the most senior?
Well, I would say, I mean, the greatest impact you can see in investment clearly because you can calculate the benefit. So we have over 15 years of data history and you can really test that in a month. So we sell that to hedge funds and asset managers. And they
Right.
can see on their existing strategy what would they have earned with the data, how much more outperformance they could have achieved and how much risk reduction, and they can quantify it by the assets they have running on the strategy. So it's just much more transparent what the value is in numbers. The other use cases, it's a software approach. It's similar to when you hear AI projects are not bringing in the ROI that companies expected. That's because it's hard to measure. If you get a little bit more efficient or you tie in all of a sudden, I don't know, 6,400 times as much data as you used before, then you also obviously detecting 10 times more potential risk events and you're able to analyze them 80% faster. But it doesn't add up to, you don't need the risk manager anymore, which the management wants, right?
Yeah.
So they cannot save money directly. It makes them better. They follow best practice, they're state of the art, but it's not resulting in monetary direct balance sheet impact like the investment strategy. So that's a harder sell, I would say, because you really need to want to improve your decision making. So let's take the sustainability practice, for example. Mandatory to take a rating into your decision making. So that the regulator pushed. So everyone adopted the rating, right? But all of our clients are aware that the ratings are very internally biased. They're purely based on what the company says about themselves. So, I mean, of course, you say, we don't have any corruption or we do not enact in fraud or child labor, right? But then if you take our outside in perspective and you can see, okay, the company is exposed in multiple allegations of child labor, fraud and corruption, and they have the best rating, should you then
Yeah.
just blindly follow your rating? Because the rating is only going to update in the worst case in a year, right? So there's very few players in the industry that really want to take the stand and be like, I want to be best in class. So I'm taking the inside out and I combine it with the outside in real time perspective. Yeah, I'm sorry to
How,
say. I think there we need to wait until regulators push this more. Right now, it's just the industry leaders or companies that really are bound to very deep values when it comes to sustainability that do these extra steps. Yeah.
So do you think that regulators should consider unstructured data more, like the kind of a data that
Yes. Yes.
requires analysis? Yeah.
They need to, because I mean, so far you could get by with, I don't have the manpower or the time for every decision to look at the entire internet and check all the news, right? So it was good to kind of say that, and you overlooked the fraud story or the ties in the article to a sanctioned entity or whatever. But that's not true anymore, right? For every decision, you can really eradicate this uncertainty that today you're forced to leave on the table. So I think, we've seen so many scandals in the recent years in the financial industry that you absolutely need to make this mandatory. I mean, if the technology is there, the possibility is there to really run a search in seconds across all the news and see, are they involved in any risk event? You have the obligation to quickly check if that's relevant for your decision or not.
And I mean, I totally get that, and I think that's probably the right way to go in the future. Today, we still have a lot of issues with hallucination in Gen AI, especially. I don't know what your tech stack looks like, but how do you work to ensure that the insights you get, that they're explainable, trustworthy, there's no hallucination? Like, it would be a shame if they would say, "Oh, you have 10 slave camps in Africa," but in reality, that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about two very different technologies here. So, I mean, the large language models, they're basically,
Yeah,
predicting what word could come, and it's built as a sparings partner that always has an answer. Let's say it's the perfect liar, right? So, how they did it, they had two models and they trained one model to be giving such good answers that the other model couldn't decipher it as a wrong answer anymore. I mean, would you hire that in a professional context? Would you hire a professional liar? Because you will never be able to tell if
of
he's
course,
telling
no.
you the truth or not. So it's actually not really suitable for B2B usage as it started out, right? When Gen AI came. And what we did is we created a narrow model, a specialized model that's only purpose is to analyze the world's news efficiently, identify the companies that are appearing. So we track over 250,000 and we can infinitely scale that and detect, are they involved in any of the 170 relevant business events that we track? And then we create a quantified news presence. So we can say how much they're in the news. They're 10 times as more in the news as last quarter. The sentiment rose by 30%. The events driving the news coverage is a date that lies in the future. So it's not in the present, not in the past. So it's a future rumor. You can see in what role they are. Are they the acquirer, not the acquired party? So it's very granular, like a human analyst. You can see the other events they have, and that gives you a very fine-grained perception. And this is all it does, right? So it picks the facts from news. Okay, you can argue there is some wrong facts in the news and there's maybe fake news. That's why we do not tie in social media, because there it's not possible to distinguish the right from wrong. But when you rely on news sources that have been existing for 10, 40, 50, 100 years, right, it's not so easy to create a news outlet that posts, good content on a daily basis in a high frequency over a stretch of years, right? And yeah, that's what our model does. So it has.
And how, just a question on that last bit. How good is it, and how do you work maybe technically to kind of balance different perspectives? Because that's something we see now, right? We have maybe politically far right outlets say something completely different from far left outlets, but they're talking about the same thing.
Well, I mean, the clients or people ask me always like, do you give a weighting to sources? So we don't do that. I developed my own concept about it and I call it news Darwinism. I mean,
Mm.
if the source is already strong, like Guardian, it will be replicated by many others. So it already has a resonance, a echo body, right? So you don't need to give it a higher weighting and rank it in some sort. If your podcast or your blog is writing a story, in order for it to travel far, it must have a really good insight, a breaking story that no one else has, and then it gets this repetition. So that takes care of it by its own. And I think in terms of the technology stack, for me, this whole LLM tech stack, we all have the same models, right? So that again is a commodity. It is a user interface for us. I mean, we had built a SaaS platform, which is, let's say, a bit more sophisticated and complicated, which is for business experts, where you can see all the nitty gritty quantified trends down to every article and event span and go into deep research. But you also have alerts based on the scores, which is a more light user interface, right? I want to be alerted and have a short summary. And then you have reports that create a 2-page PDF on your portfolio or the company, how it in the news with a given focus like credit or ESG. And now we have, let's say, the easiest to interact, which is the chat, right? You can just ask a question. It will take the question. And in our case, it's not bound to give you an answer. It will go on a RAG, a retrieval engine on our database. And it's very good in time isolation. So if you ask about last quarter or last month, that's where LLMs are not good at. Here, it will really go on that time frame, check the news, and it has a quantified distribution of what was relevant. And then it makes a summary based on that, but it will also show you what's not in the summary. And that's when you speak about hallucination. Maybe it's not only hallucination, but if I give you a summary from, I don't know, a meeting, I do this based on what I found relevant, and I do this based on my own perspective, right? So it is a biased summary again. The LLM does the same, but I'm not telling you what I'm leaving out, which might have been the most important point for you. So we're trying to fusion the two formats and say, okay, the chat gives you a very nice summary, and the summary is highlights. But then on the side, we also show you a statistical representation of the most relevant events that the company was involved. So maybe you can see a cyber attack, a data breach, a child labor there that's not mentioned in the summary. And then you can actually see, okay, that's not in there. And you can use the due diligence SaaS platform to see, okay, what's the story around that? Why did I not see it? And of course, you can do that either with the interface or ask the chat again. But you need this orientation. And I think that's the differentiator between our setup for Beetroot, because it's very contextualized. So we have been building agents, which is this huge topic since the beginning, right? We specialized the whole NLP engine to analyze the news like a credit analyst, like an ESG analyst, or like an investor. So we trained it what's important, what events are relevant, and they have a different weighting, and they produce even a condensed KPI, a score. So you can compare it over time with the history of the company, but also with the peer group. So you can say, this company I'm looking at has a higher ESG risk score than its peer group, and it's mainly due to social. And in social, it has these and these problems. So you're drawing really quick analysis that would take months. It's not even possible to do it with a team. And that's the advantage if you quantify it. And if you pair it up with the summarization, it's just easier for everyone to kind of onboard to this technology and interact with it. And that gives you this proactive assistant, you know. I mean, the biggest challenge today is to find out where you need to look. I mean, the whole finance industry runs on that. What are they doing? They monitor the global events, the market events, and then every department takes a stance and reacts, right? Either they invest or they sell or they do a risk analysis or they do a research on what's the impact of, I don't know, some logistics being blocked, and then they make a hypothesis. And that's basically where the money is at. But the LLMs, you already put the question. So you already know what you're looking for. So that is sort of just a better form of Googling it. But the hard question is what you need to look for. And that's what we trained our assistant for. It knows your role, what's important for you, what your exposure is, either an investment exposure or partners, your supply chain, or your competitors. All of it is stored, and it tracks all of them and then says, okay, you are in the ESG role. You have an ESG risk build up in these companies here. So it's a data-driven prioritization where you need to focus, and then it will tell you what is happening there. And that's kind of the assistant that you want. It grabs you out of the meeting and says, hey, you need to look at this urgent case here. This is happening. I think we need to react, and this is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. That's the expert. So we don't go that far. We're really focusing to be the best on when it comes to news analysis. But here also with the development of agent frameworks, we can tie in all the other data silos that the expert has. And then you can also give a draft of what you think they should be doing, and they can work on top of that.
I've heard, so your platform, obviously, or your package, your service offering has many components that you mentioned. It has this super powered alert system that I think is like a much better version of Google Alerts that we used to rely on back in the days.
Yeah.
Still, many of us are. You have the chat interactions, the reports, the SaaS platform, the LLM. What do you think has been the hardest technologically to realize and kind of get to where you want it to be?
Well, it's clearly not the deliverable parts. So the different UI interfaces, that's the easiest part. The underlying intelligence, I mean, as said, can you force your 1.5-year-old to speak properly? No, you can't. You need to teach him
Really?
and you need to be patient, right? So it takes a long time for the little details. I mean, all of the clients, all of the global banks, they have tried to build a news algorithm, and it looks easy when you start out, but you soon realize there is a lot of challenges to overcome, and that was kind of like a historical technology development where also the tech stack got better, the compute got more powerful, and you could resolve things that were impossible. So over the time, I mean, in the beginning, it was to create the correct sentiment, then attributing multiple sentiment in one sentence. So every span. So you can have 5 companies in there and it can be positive, negative, and neutral among them. Then we went to more granular approach because we said, okay, sentiment is good, but all the PR fluff and puff that's not really relevant for your business decision is in there. That's why we focus on events, because events drive your business and you can then just focus on what matters to you. So we created the event cluster where you need to create an understanding, not a bag of words where it just looks for words, but an understanding what's an. Then the challenge was, okay, I mean, there is different cyber attacks. So it's not just one cyber attack. There is instances, and the business speaks not about cyber attack, but there's a cyber attack on our email program, and there is another cyber attack on, I don't know, our production facility. So these are 2 different business cases that on a business level you treat differently. And the engine also needs to get more granular there. That's, for example, the last step that we managed to go from events to event instances and tie really the role. So in one attack, you could be the attacker, and the other attack, you are attacked. That's a whole different thing. Are you sued or are you suing? Is it in the past? There's a lot of remuneration of the past. A C-level departs, and then they go about, he restructured the company, fired 30,000 people, right? But it's in the past. Maybe it's still bad because it kind of, invokes the memory with consumers and people, and it's negative for the brand. But it's definitely not as valuable as, okay, they are firing 5,000 people today, or in a week, they're probably going to fire 5,000 people, which will be future. So there we have the most granular and powerful event detection engine on the market because it can do all of these things. The roles, then the temporality and the factuality. Is it probable? Is it possible? Or factual language? And that's what you can combine then to filter out what you want. I only want probable future looking statements around these 5 events, because that could be a sales lead or that could be an upcoming risk. So we're creating a data set that gives everyone the possibility to create his own strategy around it, because his industry expertise, how he understands how things go together and what is a value and what action needs to be tied to it, that's his craftsmanship. And we provide him the data and the tools to see it and to do it efficiently.
So it seems like I'm foreseeing, I don't know if it's dystopian, but a future where we have a agentic AI that is cooperating maybe with an engine like Yukka, but then you're still missing the human component in that. Like, how do you think we'll see an all-in-one package at some point with agents that are using wisdom or something derived from the insights on the market, but also, this there's something else, right?
Well, I mean, this depends on what part of the value chain, right? Where the human component is really adding value. I mean, that's why I'm saying every company probably has to overcome the biggest challenge, and that's the change management, right? Because every member is going to fear that AI will eradicate his job. And that's everyone, literally everyone now. So you need to get their buy-in to adopt the change and move forward, because that's the only way your company will stay at its level and be competitive. Because if you're not exploring the benefits of this technology, you will not be competitive anymore. So that's the number one blocker. And here, I think what we are doing is something that the human brain cannot do anyway. How long would a research team need to read the world's finance news? Like just one day of finance news is probably 1 month or 2 months for a research team. So it's not even possible to screen in a due diligence all the news out there. It's also not feasible because you cannot price it to the client. But if you're using an AI like ours to aggregate, find all of the relevant articles, to analyze, to structure it, to quantify it, and to give you a report that tells you, okay, if you're looking at news-based related risk events, you have a low news-based credit risk score. And here are the 5 events we found. Here's the summary. Here's the articles. That is a huge benefit. Why should you do that manually, right? Because it is always prone to human error. As a team manager, you're never sure, as a person doing that diligently, searching in the news or not. It's basically up to yourself. That's what I said with the analogy. A business doesn't have a root system like a tree that makes sure that every business unit and leaf can thrive. If the leaf is the business expert, right now he more or less tries to grab from the air the relevant articles, but it's not a systematic approach that comes, from the DNA of the company. So we are programming what companies are important, what events are important, and how do different experts look at it, and give them a systematic, quantified approach to see, okay, that's the companies and topics I need to look at. That assures you that you have a unified approach to it. So everyone will check it on the same aggregation basis. So it crunches through 2 million news a day. It has over 3 billion news in the archive. That's then your minimum level, right? And the cool thing is it also has a benefit for the expert, right? Because he can document now, point in time when I looked at it and did my decision, this was visible, but also other things that maybe later come up weren't visible. So you can really safeguard or prove your decision making and document it. And if you see something that's relevant, you can escalate it in our software to compliance or a team manager and say, okay, I'm seeing here child labor or fraud or whatever event. Can we still move forward with the deal? And then you create an audit trail of how you came up to the decision that you do the deal. You attach all of it, and then it's bulletproof for the team leader because everyone is doing it systematically, and there's accountability because you know who looked at it, what did you check, and why did you go through with it. And it's also bulletproof for you as an expert because you can say, I followed the best in class process. And that's where I think you have a quick win as an organization because it gives benefit to the individual worker, but it's also not threatening his existence. Other approaches, I would be more careful. I mean, you've probably seen the movie Her. So what we are
Definitely.
doing with the LLMs, the GPTs, is very similar, right? We're telling it everything about us and what we do. And to a certain part, it will learn rapidly from that and create automations of it. I mean, these companies also said that that's their strategy, and there's very few of them, and they're all based out of the US. So I think for businesses, this is a big risk
And
because
just speaking of Her, I assume that you will not be able to turn Yukka into a romantic partner at any point.
well, if you're, I don't know, very into news and reading and geopolitical events, you maybe could have some romantic conversations about
Yeah.
it. I mean, you could
Take a
because
note.
you have the entire LLM engine on top. You could enable it to do everything what the LLM models are capable of, and they're clearly capable of doing that. But it's not in our focus, not at the moment. But if risk managers request that the answer is given in a flirty tone, then we can do that. I mean, everything is possible. We were one of the first ones to try out HN with the avatars and made our LLM speak to provide a more, perception. it's very easy to do. So there's a lot of tools out there. Yeah, it seems like nothing is impossible anymore. But I think, yeah, when it comes to business, it has become a geopolitical instrument. So it's definitely, yeah, a development war for power and influence
Yeah.
between different states. So China, US, everyone involved. And clearly Europe, yeah, did not take a very big stance on it. And companies, now it's cheap, like always, and it scales up quickly and you get used to it. Then you get dependent on it. And then it can also become more expensive if there's no alternatives, because yeah, it was kind of scaled up with funding to be so cheap that everyone adopts it, but also no alternative is surviving, then you're running out of options. So that's a big risk here. And yeah, if you're teaching it what you're doing, yeah, these companies might also create automation services. So our plan was never to replace the experts, but help them. So I always called it augmented language intelligence, to not say AI, because AI was always very scary. So as a very first mover on this technology, we had to educate the market about what sentiment is, why it's not priced in, how NLP works, what this does. And we always kind of stayed away from the term artificial intelligence, because it was bound to science fiction and people thinking about robots that replace their job essentially, which, yeah, is not what we're trying to do here. So I called it augmented language intelligence, that augments your ability to look at much more data in a very short time and make a better decision, but based on your expert judgment, your experience, how the industry runs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think regardless of exactly how it develops, products like your own, like Yukka, I think will be a fundamental part of the future. I think unless something radical happens to the cost of running these operations. And the question, I guess, is it going to be for the much better, for the neutral, or for the worse? Like, is it going to be a dark route? You have other, I wouldn't call them competitors, but your companies like Palantir, who are in the news, is a bit more controversial what's happening there. And
Yeah.
so I'm just seeing that there are different paths that we could go down the line.
Well, that is a very big question. Well, I think it's now in the hands of capitalistic companies that want to make money with it. So I guess it is quite clear that they will monetize on the data and what they learn. I mean, before we use Google to get the information and they leverage the data. And I mean, they pretty much knew a lot or the same amount about everyone. And yeah, they use the data to make money with it and built up 90% market share in all of the different verticals they were in. So it's probably going to be a similar playbook that they will try to dominate a large part of all business applications you can do. And I think that's going to be a change also for B2B software providers, right? Because if you're interfacing with agents, that would mean you're not interfacing with platforms anymore. These, yeah, few players that get large share of the people used to interact solely over their voice agent. They will then access through MCP protocols, agent to agent, all the different platforms, and deliver the information to the person. That will be a big shift. And I think that's a bit what the competition is for, at least on the B2B side. I see, yeah, that for Microsoft, cooperating with OpenAI is also a bit of a risk on that side.
Right.
On the other hand, it remains to be answered, in a B2B setting. Will you interact with a voice agent? Does that even work in an office setting? Is that weird? So I think that won't develop as fast as everyone thinks, and it will create new job roles on top of it as in the past. But yeah, I think it's definitely a lot of power dynamics in the moving, and yeah, we'll see how it's going to play out.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time. It was great talking to you, Oliver. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, Sebastian, was great. Thanks for the questions, and yeah, it was a pleasure to be on the podcast, and wish you a great day.
Thank you. And for all the listeners, we'll have a link so you can check Oliver out. You can check Yukka out in the description of this episode. Bye bye.